Hello, everyone. My name is Israel Borokini, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Integrative Biology at the University of California, Berkeley, and also one of the board members of the Northern California Botanics. Today, I will be talking about one of my research studies, which focus on the conservation implications of the discovery of new locations of a threatened species using iterative ensemble niche modeling. And I also want to appreciate my co-authors and advisors who helped me along the way in publishing and completing this study. First, I want to start by reminding us of the Wallacean shortfall, which explains that we have very limited knowledge of the geographical distribution of most species. And because of that, it can affect our conservation prioritization for this species when we don't know which species are truly endemic or rare and those that are widely spread. So this Wallacean shortfall really have a strong impact or effect on our conservation efforts. And this shortfall was attributed or was used to honor Alfred Russel Wallace, who was a British naturalist who traveled across most of tropical Asia. Because of this limited understanding on the geographical distribution of most species, ecological niche modeling have been used to model or to describe the geographical distribution of the suitable habitat for specific species. And so we can use that, we can extrapolate that to describe the range or the geographical distribution of a particular species, which can be used to inform conservation efforts and management strategies. So first, what is ecological niche modeling? Basically, when we fit niche models, we are describing the range of ecological conditions that support the persistence of that species. So in other words, we're describing the environmental niche of a species as opposed to functional niche of a species, which talks about their role or their functional role in an ecosystem. When we fit niche models, we use the species occurrence points plus absence points, whether it is true absence points generated from field surveys or pseudo absence points, which are generated from the model itself. And then, of course, we use predictor variables. So we use species occurrence points, absence points, environmental predictor variables, which are variables that we believe from literature or from expert knowledge or from empirical studies that these variables have an impact on the biology of that particular species we are modeling. And of course, we need algorithms to do the modeling itself. And when we have the information, when we fit niche models, what do we use the products for? We can get more information to understand which species actually have an effect on a particular species that we are modeling. So when we know the particular variables or predictors that have an effect on the species niche, then we can use that to predict what the niche will look like in the near future, given climate change, or what the niche used to look like in the past. We could also use the maps of habitat suitability to guide field surveys, to estimate species range, and several other conservation and other empirical or evolutionary biology applications from niche modeling. Oftentimes, because prioritization favors range restricted or endemic or rare species or taxa, that is why oftentimes we use niche modeling for fitting the niche of rare species. But there's always a problem with that because many of the rare species, they are rare for a particular purpose, and also because of that, most of the occurrence points we have about them are few and biased, and at the same time, we have limited information on their species biology. And so that affects the occurrence points that goes into the niche modeling, and it also affects the variables that we bring in as well. And so it's often recommended that when you fit niche models for rare species, especially for those that have fewer occurrence points, the modeling predictions may not be reliable may have limited reliability, and so caution has to be taken in interpreting the results from such models. And that is why I use niche models. I fitted niche models for Ivisa webera, which is a new endemic species, which is range distributed along the foothills of the Sierra Nevada and the Western Great Basin Desert, and also not just to fit the niche models, but to also use the models to guide field surveys to see whether we could still find more populations of this species, and also to be able to map the suitability of this species, because this species is been recently listed as a federally threatened species, and this niche model is going to inform management strategies for this species. And so fitting these niche models and doing field surveys, I use those to ask these questions: that what are the important ecological variables that contribute to the niche of this species, and the additional spatial data that were collected from the field surveys, do they alter or affect the predicted habitat suitability for this species? And so basically what I did was an iterative niche modeling approach, such that I fitted niche models, I generated the habitat suitability maps, I used those maps to conduct field surveys, and then the additional spatial data that were collected from the field surveys were added back into the niche models for another iteration. And so I did this for a total of 5 years of niche modeling and field surveys for 5 years between 2015 and 2020, for Ivisa webera. And if you want to know a little bit more on how I did the fitted the niche models, please feel free to ask me questions, or to email me, and I will be happy to answer further questions. But basically, this slide shows you the number of predictors I started with and how I reduced them to fewer ones, and the specific algorithms I used, how I generated the Ensemble model projections, which were used to produce the habitat suitability maps, and several other model decisions and parameters that are generated for this niche modeling process. But for the habitat, for the field survey, so once a habitat suitability map is generated, like the one on this slide, showing that areas with orange colors are unsuitable for this species, but areas with the green and yellow coloration are the cells that have a degree of suitability for Ivisa webera. And so what I did was that I placed all the absence points that I have, I overlaid them on the habitat suitability maps, and then I used that to select areas that have not yet been surveyed before to go for sampling and surveys. And also, I also did what is called adaptive sampling, such that I selected areas that have not yet been surveyed, but were predicted to be suitable, that are closer to existing and known occurrence points. So I selected, so using that, I used different methods of sampling, stratified sampling based on areas that are predicted to be suitable, and also adaptive sampling, such that I sampled areas that are predicted to be suitable and also close to known occurrences. So those are the ways I did the sampling. And from that, we discovered 9 new locations of the species, increasing the occurrences from 23 to 32. And I should also mention that 7 of those new occurrences were discovered by me using this niche model guided surveys, but 2 additional locations were discovered accidentally by other agencies during their vegetative sampling. But in all, all the 9 locations, new locations, helped to increase the northern species range, extended it by 65 kilometers. So now let's go into the results. So having fitted the niche models iteratively from 2015 to 2020, and using and doing field surveys, we found out that perennial herbaceous layer and the topographic position index consistently outperform other variables, because at the end of all the thing, I started with 72 predictors and I reduced them to 6. And from that 6, I used 3, only 3 at a time for the niche model fitting, because I have fewer occurrence points. And so for each from the pool of the 6 important variables, the three most important ones that were used were the herbaceous, perennial herbaceous layer and the topographic position index were always the most important among the 3 pooled variables that were used for the iterative niche modeling across the 5 years of modeling. And looking at the partial response plots, we see that the sites that are suitable habitats for Ivisa weberi were found in areas that have at least 20% or more perennial herbaceous cover, areas that are sites that have gentle slopes or gentle ridges, and also sites that have at least 25 millimeters, that receive at least 25 millimeters summer precipitation. And this is based on the 2020 niche modeling. And this is a picture showing one of the sites. We can see Ivisa weberi there, and also several other species like some native grasses, and as well as Balsamorhiza ukeri. And we can also see bare ground microsites that is interspersed all over the site. And we can see that some of the here, the bare ground sites are covered by sand or by gravel or by sand, in addition to all the vegetation that you see over there, which represents the herbaceous layer. And also this is another site which shows something similar, but here you can see that the bare ground microsites are covered more by gravels than by sand. And you can see Balsamorhiza ukeri, you can see native grasses, and you can also see Ivisa weberi in the background. And of course, at the other side, you can, towards the end, the northern, the upper part of the slide, you can see Bromus tectorum, which is invasive species, and you can also see Medusa head, which is another invasive species, and of course some other native shrubs like Artemisia arbuscula and Portia tridentata in the background. And so that tells you that the models are actually predicting what we see on the field, showing that perennial herbaceous layer is really important, and also showing that the sites where we see the species are found in gentle slopes and gentle ridges. Now, looking at the habitat suitability maps, starting with the one we fitted in 2015 and comparing it with the one we fitted in 2020. So we did an overlap niche map overlap analysis, which shows that there is still a almost 90% similarity between the two maps. And of course, this is driven by the areas that are predicted to be unsuitable. Areas that are predicted unsuitable remain mostly the same between the two maps. But you can see that the number of cells that were predicted to be suitable decreased by almost 50% between 2015 and 2020, which means that the models are adapting themselves based on the additional spatial data that we introduced into them iteratively between 2015 and 2020. So what does that, what are the take-home message from this, especially with respect to the conservation application of this niche modeling? We can say that here, from using the iterative niche modeling approach and complemented by field surveys, we were able to increase the number of non-occurrence of these species by 39%, that is from 23 to 32. And we also expand the known range expanded by 65 kilometers. And this is going to be very, very important in informing conservation prioritization for these species. And we know many cases of species that were previously thought to be rare and threatened and endangered, but they were delisted from endangered list or the Endangered Species Act list due to the discovery of additional populations of those species. So we believe that this study is also going to inform conservation prioritization for these species, and not just in in protecting the known occurrences of these species, but also suitable but unoccupied habitat of these species could also be protected because they will be really, really important, especially given climate change, such that some species may experience changes in their niche or changes in their range. And so we need to protect some of the suitable but unoccupied habitats because they may be stepping stone for in some species adapting to changes in the environment and the climate in the near future. Also, we discovered this study also shows that we're able to identify the specific important variables for this species. And these are really, really important because it helps us to reduce false positives in the suitable habitat for this species, and it can help us to thin down and to reduce areas to where we can be very, very sure that we can find the species there, or that if the species is able to get there, it will be able to establish itself in that location. And hopefully, it is believed that this study will contribute significantly to the conservation of these federally threatened species. And with that, I want to acknowledge all the people, all the organizations and institutions and staff working in those organizations that contributed to this study, either through funding or through sharing of data or helping with field surveys. And I want to appreciate all of them, including the Northern California botanists. And if you have any question, I'm happy to answer your question. Please feel free to email me your questions or connect with me on all these other platforms, and I'm happy to answer your question. Thank you very much.